Today, this has been really heavy on my mind and in my life in the past couple of weeks, months. Um, as I try to integrate back into a life in a familiar place, a lot of these like old habits that I thought that I had broken have been creeping back in. And one of them is being codependent. I realized before I went to Thailand, that was like the first time in my life I had realized how codependent I was as a person and how much it had affected my entire life. I never really looked at myself as being codependent because when I think of codependency, I think of somebody who always has to be in a relationship. And I think of somebody who always needs to be like occupied with human beings, like needs to like, they can't be at home alone. They always want to be like socializing. Like when I think about codependency, or when I used to think about codependency, I used to think about those things, and I wasn't those things, so I didn't really realize that that was something I was struggling with too. Like codependency can show up in lots of different ways, and I'm going to talk about the ways that I see them in my life, ways that I've seen them in others' lives, and then also the things that I'm trying to do right now to like help me move through like getting out of this hole of being like codependent on others, on things outside of myself. So I noticed one of the things that I had like noticed about myself first years ago was that I am somebody who always needed to vent. If something happened to me, like that day, I needed to call somebody and just like, oh my God, I have to tell you about this. Like I needed to vent. That was being codependent. If there was something going on in my life, like if I was faced with some sort of obstacle, I, again, always needed to call somebody to get advice, especially with my relationships with, any relationship, honestly. I always would go to somebody else and be like, hey, what do you think about this situation? Because I honestly didn't feel confident in myself to try to navigate through whatever I was experiencing personally. I needed to go to somebody else. Those were two things that like I first noticed. A third thing that I noticed is that like when I would be out and about, if I was running errands or whatever, I always had to be on the phone with somebody. Like I didn't like just being with myself. I needed to be occupied. I needed to be like busy with my hands or with my thoughts. Like I always needed to be on the phone with somebody. I hated going anywhere by myself. I would like be interested in doing certain things that, like say I wanted to like go to this new meditation studio or yoga studio, like this was something that I was like really trying to overcome. Like years ago, I started to kind of realize like I was having these different interests that like all of my friends were not interested in. So I couldn't like get somebody to go with me. And so that was kind of one of the things that I had realized about like this codependency thing that I'm like, wow, it's really, really hard for me to go do something by myself, which I think led me to when I went to go solo travel for the first time when I went to Thailand, flew across the world by myself. Like I had been wanting to travel alone for years. I had gotten into this Facebook group called Girls Love Travel, and there's women that are like 18 in that group. There's women that are 80 in that group. And pretty much like everybody in that group solo travels. And so over the years, I had been like reading on that Facebook group about all these women, like even women who were literally in their 70s saying, oh, I just solo traveled for the first time. Like I was always reading about these really brave women. And I knew that that was something I needed to do because I was so scared of doing anything by myself. And this is like a list of like a couple of things I started to notice years ago when I kind of started like my personal development journey, that I noticed that like, wow, like I have been really codependent. The two things about like always being in a relationship or always needing to be with somebody, like, those were not the only codependency things out there. Like I was starting to realize how much I had been codependent. And when a couple of years ago, before I had left to go to Thailand, I was in like a really dark space. I had just found out about me potentially losing my vision, and I was like super, super in this like really dark space, and I was alone. Like I stopped working, I stopped like leaving my house. And although I had two friends that, would call and check on me, or they would come over to my house and like help me like get out of bed sometimes, like I, for the most part, was very much by myself. And while I was by myself during that time, that was when I was able to actually have this epiphany and realize that like one of the things about me was the fact that I had been codependent in so many different areas of my life, and it had really messed with me. It had really messed with my life, this like habit that I had picked up from a young age, because I was so disconnected from myself, so disconnected from my inner knowing. It really like made me feel not confident in myself because I couldn't navigate through anything by myself. Like I realized when I went into a really deep depression and I was not interested in being around people or talking to people, that was when I was able to actually sit with myself for the very first time and realize, oh my God, like you have been so codependent your entire life. And as soon as I was able to sit with myself, that was when I was able to start to like navigate through a lot of things. Like I had so many realizations about my life, and that's when I decided to go to Thailand. Looking back throughout my life, I am able to see kind of where I picked up a lot of these codependency like habits. I'll speak from people in my family. Like I was raised in an environment where venting was like normal. Everybody like, oh, they just had a bad day, they need a vent, or oh, so-and-so needs advice, so they're just coming to me for advice, or oh, I'm doing this right now, so let me call them. Like always being on the phone, always talking on the phone. I would say that like one of my parents is like never would do anything by themselves. They have no desire to like really drive down the street by themselves. Like was raised in an environment like that. I was raised with another parent that's like always needed to vent. Actually, both my parents always needed to vent. I would just say that I was raised in an environment that like it kind of bred this like codependency like energy within myself. And although some of these things like to you may be totally normal, or not normal, you may thrive in an environment like that. Like, but I personally, my belief, what I've realized over time is that the more that I kind of go outside of myself to try to find the answers or to try to emotionally work through something, venting, the more that I try to like go outside of myself in order to be able to process something, that's like I get further and further away from myself. Like I'm going to talk about at the end of this video some of the things that I've been doing that I learned over time to really help me stay connected with myself and prevent this codependency thing from happening. But ever since I came back to Dallas and I started to like integrate in different just integrate in relationships, honestly. And I'm not in a new city. Like I'm in a very familiar place. There's nothing exciting here because it's like all familiar to me. Like now that I'm in a very familiar place and trying to integrate in relationships back into my life, I have been finding myself creeping back into this codependency vibe, this energy. And also like since integrating people into my life who have codependency themselves, that has also been a huge reason why this has been hard, because when you're around people who are also codependent, they also need to vent to you. They also need to get your advice, like whatever. At least for me, like when I start getting in dynamics like that, in relationships like that, like it breeds me to want, like it makes me want to be like that too. It just naturally, it's like, oh, well, they vented to me. Let me tell you about my story. Like when you are trying to be codependent or you're trying to not be codependent, it's really hard when you are around people who are codependent. And so as I've been trying to like integrate back into a familiar place, integrate relationships back into my life, I've been finding myself like having this codependent like energy about myself, like needing to call somebody when I am emotionally distressed, needing to call somebody when something has happened and I can't, like, I need advice or I can't sift through what is going on. Like, and I have realized the more that I've like gone that direction, gone down the road of codependency and less down the road of tapping in with myself first instead, that's when everything has started, like my mind started to get cloudy and I started to like, my judgment started to like not really be great, or I emotionally was not making good decisions. Like I was like lashing out and all of that because I just was so out of touch with myself. And so some of the things that I've learned throughout like my personal development journey, I talk about all the time, which is meditation, journaling, something that I've been doing a lot recently, which I haven't really talked about on YouTube, is walking meditations. I'll definitely have to talk all about that later because that's like a whole thing I've not even talked about. But over the past couple of weeks, like a lot of my relationships have been affected, or I won't say a lot. Some relationships that I really care about have been affected because of this codependency addiction, I would say, that I've allowed to like creep back into my life. And so honestly, in my life, in my experience, when you are codependent with people who are not codependent, it makes them run away from you. And I have experienced that all throughout my life about my codependency, like pushing people away. And now that I'm aware of this, of like the codependency myself, I am realizing how I have gotten pushed away from people who are trying to be codependent on me. And so over the past couple of weeks, like I have been, as my relationships have kind of been shifting and changing because of my behavior of like needing to be codependent on others, like I've realizing, okay, I see where you've messed up. Like I see where you fell back into some old habits. Like let's try to tap back into yourself. So I've been really trying to implement back into my day, my journaling, my meditation, something new that I'm like, it's kind of funny at this point, but like walking meditations. There's a trail like right near my house and it's a 3.5 mile trail. Yesterday I walked that trail for 7 miles. I walked up and down that trail in the middle of the Texas summer, in the middle of the day. And I've been doing that like every single day. I have been walking miles because I'm like, I just need to sit with myself. I literally leave my phone at home. I just go walk. And even more recently, I've been adopting, like I'm putting my phone on do not disturb. I will check my phone maybe once every couple of hours. Like I just want to be disconnected from others. And it's not because I'm like self-isolating or I'm depressed. It's just like I need to tap back into myself. And this is like the fact that I have not been tapped in with myself has caused a lot of destruction in my relationships and also within myself internally. And I have noticed that, like it took me 30 years before to realize how like I was a very codependent person. And, over the last 2 years, I've been able to kind of like move away from that energy. But now that I'm back in like a familiar place, there's nothing new. It's not distracting here because it's just familiar. I've kind of gone back into this like codependency energy. And it's within a couple of like, honestly, 2 months, probably, maybe 3 months, this codependency energy has like full force jumped back into my soul. And it's really been like blowing up a lot of stuff in my life. And although I believe that everything happens like divinely perfectly, like I'm not upset that this codependency thing has like come back in and it's kind of like disrupted some things. It's all great because it's helped me realize like, okay, you are not where you thought that you were as far as growth. Like, you still need a lot of work in this area. So I wanted to make a video about my own personal struggles with codependency and what I'm trying to do to get through it. Like, one of the biggest things is when I'm like emotionally upset, I'm like, even if it's like in my soul to call somebody and try, like, oh, I really just need somebody to hear me, see me, give me advice. Like, I'm trying everything in my soul to like sit down, journal, go for a walk, and even go so much as the length of, like, I told my friend the other day, I was like, look, if I call you, do not answer the first time. Like, maybe wait a day. Because I know, like, in the state that I've been in recently, like, I have just been so like reaching for others. And the more that I reach for others, the further I get away from myself. And the further I'm away from myself, the less I'm able to like tap into my intuition, my inner knowing. And that's when I start messing up. That's when I start making poor decisions. And this whole codependency, trying to break these like generational habits, energies, like, this is something I'm determined to do. I've experienced what it feels like to be super connected to myself. I've experienced that before. And so now that I know what that feels like and I know how beneficial that is, I want to keep that in my life. And it's just been very eye-opening coming back here to Dallas that like that's still something I'm struggling with and that I need to get through. It is like I am determined to get through like really being connected with myself and not needing anyone outside of myself in order to operate, in order to like get through life. Because in all reality, everything shifts and moves and changes and goes away. Like, everybody seems to think like things are permanent in life. Like, our relationships are permanent, or my house is permanent, or my job is permanent, or my whatever. And what I realized like years ago is that nothing is permanent. Nothing, literally. Like, things are always shifting and moving. Like, even with Bear, my dog, like, I have grown codependent on her. Like, I always want to be with her. I don't want to leave her by herself. Like, like, there's going to come a point in time when she's not here anymore. And so what's going to happen then? Like, how earth shattering will that be when she's not here if I'm just so codependent on her? And that goes for everybody with anything and everyone. Like, those of us who are so codependent on our relationships, or we're codependent on our children, or we are like super dependent on our jobs. Like, we use our jobs to distract ourselves or to like work out stuff within ourselves emotionally. Like, all of these things eventually will like shift and or change or go away at some point in time. All of it does. So, it's better, in my opinion, to really nip that in the bud. Like, I'm trying my best to operate in a place that's very like free flowing and allowing things to come in and out of my life, because I know that at some point in time, everything will exit and leave or shift or change. And so codependency is something I've really been struggling with my whole life. I'm sure like our culture, I personally believe, like, breeds this codependency thing. But that's maybe another video. But I want to know, like, what do you find yourself being like codependent on? Or if you've personally broken codependency yourself, what did you do in order, like, what exercises or what things did you do in order to like break this? Because like I said, I've just really been journaling, meditating, doing walking meditations. Like, I'm just trying to stay as connected to myself as I possibly can. So I want to know if you have any other tips too. So comment below.